Yeah. Hello, everyone. So hello, everyone in the room, of course. Hello, everyone online. Welcome to the first CSH seminar of the year. So we at the CSH, of course, to start, would like to extend our warmest wishes for this year, for 2024, to everyone. So I am Joël Caballon. I'm a head researcher here at the CSH and in charge of the seminar with Laurence Gauthier, who unfortunately could not be here with us today. We are very happy today to welcome Dr. Vikas Kumar for a presentation entitled Numbers as Political Allies, the Census in Jammu and Kashmir. Dr. Vikas Kumar is an associate professor of economics at Azim Premji University in Bengaluru. His research explores the interfaces between politics and statistics, economics and religion, Kauṭilya's Arthasastra and other pre-modern texts as well. Amongst other things, he curated an exhibition called Baba Saheb, an extraordinary philatelic journey, 1966 to 2022, at the India International Center, as well as counting and controlling population, postal services, census, and family planning in post-colonial India, 1951 to 2011, at Bangalore International Center in 2023. His recent publications that I will circulate in a little while during the seminar include Numbers as Political Allies, on which he will be speaking today, the census in Jammu and Kashmir at Cambridge University Press, just released last year in 2023, as well as Waiting for a Christmas Gift, essays on politics, elections, and media in Nagaland, and last but not least, that I will be circulating as well, a book called Numbers in India's Periphery, the Political Economy of Government Statistics at Cambridge University Press as well, co-authored with Ankush Agarwal. Dr. Kumar, thank you again for being with us today. I also want to thank Dr. Chakravarti Mahajan for agreeing to be with us today for the discussion. Dr. Mahajan teaches anthropology at Delhi University, India, and was in 2021-22 Charles Wallace Fellow at the Queen's University, Belfast, Northern Ireland. He has done his PhD from Punjab University, Chandigarh, and the Institute of Economic Growth, New Delhi. His research has focused on Jammu and Kashmir and engaged a broad range of ethnographic and theoretical issues, including communalism, inter-community relations, psychosocial dimensions of militarization, and anthropology of health. Dr. Mahajan's recent publications include, amongst others, journal articles and edited book contributions such as Everyday Communalism and Shifting Food Practices in Jammu and Kashmir in 2020, Narrating Fear, Tracing Landscape, Memory and Militancy in Doda, Jammu and Kashmir in 2021, Pastoral Subjectivity, Sedentarization and Healthcare Challenges of the Gujars of Jammu and Kashmir, and Militarization and Mental Distress in Jammu and Kashmir as well. Thanks again to both of you. To our colleagues and audience online, just a quick comment. Please later on write your questions in the dialog box. Once we get to the Q&A, we will then read them out as much as possible after taking questions in the room first. Dr. Kumar, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. And let me first begin by extending my warm greetings for Sankranti, and also thanking the CSH for organizing this. Can we have the presentation on these? So I'll try to sum up the argument in the book in the next 30 to 35 minutes, and then we'll have extended discussion with Dr. Mahajan and then everyone else in the room. So yes. So one of the things that we were pretty particular about at the stage of designing the cover of the book was that the moment when people hear Jammu and Kashmir, they try to see it in terms of Hindu, Muslim, or Jammu and Kashmir binary. So we want to decenter that and right on the cover, bring in as much complexity as possible, right? And the same thing is something that we tried in the epigraph to the first chapter, except the Pahari community, everyone else is represented here. And I now regret that I did not include Pahadis. At that time, I thought that the epigraph is becoming too long, 2 pages already, so I should keep it short. But then I should have included the Pahadis as well. The book begins with a chapter debating numbers, where I lay out the broad conceptual framework within which I'm going to discuss the data from Jammu and Kashmir. In my presentation today, I'll discuss the first chapter towards the end. Then I talk in the second chapter, I talk about the uncertainties within which Jammu and Kashmir's statistics are collected. The third chapter does the main body of statistical analysis. Now, but in the third chapter, we identified that there are problems A, B, C, D, but we do not explain why are they, and who might be responsible. Now, the third part of the book lays out the context. The first, the political context, then the legal administrative context, and finally the national politics. And in the last chapter, I use the insights drawn from the previous 6 chapters to suggest a couple of uh, reforms to make the census relevant in the 21st century. So let me begin with locating Jammu and Kashmir. If you look at colonial conception of land space, Jammu and Kashmir belong to frontier region. Now, as you moved away from the productive core of the colony, the quality of maps and statistics declined. Now, interestingly, even 75 years later, this continues to be true. As you move away from the plains of Assam or Punjab, the quality of data declines. Jammu and Kashmir also belongs to the ethnic periphery of India. Broadly speaking, if you look at terms of religion, etc., it also belongs to the policy periphery. It falls in the areas which enjoy constitutional exceptionalism or constrained delimitation, or a special physical arrangement. It also belongs to India's statistical periphery. If you look at census, national sample survey, national population register, digital INT, in each of these cases, the Northeast and Jammu and Kashmir have reported anomalies. Now, so therefore, I begin by arguing, and I'm beginning by locating Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir in the periphery, because towards the end, I'd like to argue that the debate that we are going to have on Kashmir is not just about Kashmir. It's part of a larger body of frontier in the country, right? So now a few stylized facts about the data from periphery. There is a irregularity in these surveys and censuses. There are large coverage errors. There are large content errors. Some of these errors are often mistaken as the characteristic of the underlying data generating process, right? In fact, every time you come across some anomaly in periphery, people try to justify it by saying that this might be part of the way things are there. But this is not the case, I would argue. Now, if you look at the change in the census data from 2001 to 2011, there was a large increase in the child population share. There's a sharp decrease in the child sex ratio, a sharp increase in the slum population, and a mismatch between the tribal population and speakers of tribal languages, right? And there was a change in the relative population share of different parts of the state. And some of these changes, as I'll argue, are completely counterintuitive and require further scrutiny. So if you look at the census base child sex ratio in 2011, it was 862. Every other known source, I've just shown 4 others here, there are many others in book. Each one of them shows that this child sex ratio is much higher. I mean, I'm not saying that all other sources are correct, but I'm just saying that because the bulk of government statistics and other field studies are saying that the sex ratio is much higher than it was reported in the census. So the census, point is an outlier, and we need to look at that. You look at if you look at the reported versus expected population for 2011, the 10 to 14 population seems to be hugely overestimated, even under the assumption that there's no death at all. Even under the assumption of zero death, it seems that there's been a huge overestimation of 10 to 14 population. If you look at the household size, Kashmir's household size in 2001 increases sharply and anomalously, right? If you look at the child sex ratio at the level of your districts of Kashmir, it is Jammu and Kashmir. Only Kashmir shows a sharp decrease. Jammu and Ladakh do not show the decrease of that scale, and the data from Kashmir is inconsistent with SRS, HMIS, and NFHS, etc., etc. Look at, again, I'm just trying to project the same data in a slightly different way. Again, all districts of Kashmir are outliers. See, there could be an anomaly in district A or district B, locality 1 or locality 2, but all districts of the particular region simultaneously being outliers is something strange. Look at the slum population. Srinagar slum population grows by almost 3 times, whereas the slum population of Jammu contracts. And I've been Srinagar 10 times or 20 times just to see where this large slum population stays in the city. I have not been able to find it. Then you look at the languages of Ladakh. There is, from 1,000 to 1 lakh and from 1 lakh to 5,000. No, and this is despite no large out migration, in migration, etc., etc., and no change of boundaries either. Now look at child sex. Now you could say, well, maybe this is a story of Jammu and Kashmir, but this might be true for every other state. So we look at compare it with all other states as well. Jammu and Kashmir is a clear outlier here. Look at again, child population share. Jammu and Kashmir is a clear outlier. The only other exception is this point, which is Nagaland, but this was because in 2011 their accumulated errors were corrected. Then if you look at the single year age data, then again you see that Jammu and Kashmir behaves differently only at the lower age groups compared to India. You disaggregate across Jammu and Kashmir divisions, only Kashmir shows it normally here. Now this data, and I've just shown you a very small fraction of the mistakes in the or anomalies in the census. This data has been used by a variety of national and state level policy making bodies. The 15th Finance Commission used the fertility data based on the 2011 census, and Jammu and Kashmir had the second highest fertility in the country. Right? Now, if this is the case, the child population share is growing and you've got a high fertility rate, so then your school-going population has to increase. School registers have to show that. Then the school registers do not show a sharp increase in population there. Now, let us look at the problems, the way problems appear. So, in the book, I do discuss the problems in the maps which are used for census, but I will not be able to go deep into that. But here, let me just talk about a particular thing: reference dates. The population is, distribution of Kashmir is very sensitive to the reference date chosen. This is because a substantial group of people migrate from one part to other part depending on which time of the year you're taking a census. And this can have a sharp, for instance, if you do a census when the Darbar has moved to Jammu, the Muslim population share will definitely increase because a lot of Kashmiri Muslim employees also come here, right? if you do a census when the Darbar has gone to Srinagar, so then, there'll be, so we need to look at this. So before independence, under princely state, there used to be 3 different divisions of Kashmir in terms of the way census is conducted. But after independence, they just 2, snowbound and non-snowbound. So snowbound follows a different calendar, and the non-snowbound is as per the national calendar. Uh, you know, a small change, even by a week of the reference date, can change the district level population shares. Now, in fact, in 1961, when Holi, resulted in a change in the calendar, and in one of the census in which, Eid led to a change in calendar, it had an impact on the population shares. Now, the state is interesting because there are 5 groups of people who move. The nomadic tribes, which are Akarwals, a very large body of people who move between Jammu and Kashmir. Then, there's a boat population which moves between Srinagar and Bandipur. Then there is the forest labor who are in forested areas and in a particular time of the year. Then there used to be, until 2021, when the Darbar move was cancelled, there used to be a substantial body of government officials who move from one part to another. Then finally, conflict related displacement of people. Now, conflict can affect fertility, fertility can affect conflict, and we also know that conflict is central to making of identity, and it can trigger numbers games. Now, I've been arguing for some time now that instead of looking just at conflict and numbers, we should look at data development and democracy. Because conflict, as I'm going to show in a short while, is a very small part of the overall equation, right? So I'm not going to go into the literature here. Let me say something about the regional communal anxieties there. Right? So Kashmir has a unique demographic anxiety in the world, it seems. Balraj Puri, 1983 EPWPs, he said that this is a rare place where Muslims are a majority at the sub-national level, but a minority at the national level, right? And he says that this is an unusual experience. Now, but this is not the case that we can just talk in terms of Muslims or non-Muslims. They're Jammu Muslims, they're tribal Muslims, they're Kargili Shias, and so on and so forth. And Pahadi Muslims, I should add. I'm not sure why I keep forgetting the Pahadis as well. But Pahadis are here. I'm sorry for that. Then then Buddhists, right? Now, interestingly, there is an indigenous Buddhist population in Ladakh, but there's also indigenous Buddhist population in Ishtwar as well. Yes. So therefore, and then the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are, Hindus and Muslims. Now, in this state, what has happened over the years, right from the day when the tribal invasion happened in 1947, right from that day when Sheikh Abdullah gave his press conference, demography has emerged as a touchstone of public policy. Everything is checked for whether it matches with the population shares or not. And then, of course, if you use demography in this politically charged atmosphere, environment, become political instrument of sorts. Now, so here I'm giving you a very small snapshot of the events around 1991 census. 1991 census could not be conducted in Jammu Kashmir. This was this became the only state which missed the census 2 times after independence. 1951 could not be conducted. Now, we often assume that 1951 could not be conducted due to tribal invasion, but that's not true. It's a much more complex, scene out there in terms of the way people made choices and so that 1991 again it was not conducted. Now, the standard explanation is that because there was terrorism in the state, but there was much more intense terrorism in Punjab, etc. So I look into the archival records to argue why it was not conducted, even though the level of militancy in terms of per 1,000 people casualties, etc., was much lower in Kashmir in 1991. Unless you look at the administrative processes, a superficial comparison between Punjab and Kashmir would lead to conclusion that they could have done it here. But if you look at the administrative records, actually, and then I explained through this timeline how they gradually converge from a situation where they claim that they can do it easily. They come to a conclusion that they cannot do it, and just 1 week before the actual census, they say we cannot do it. Right? Now, what exactly is happening here? Now look at 2000, and again 2001. They did the census despite much more intense militancy in terms of the number of people killed. It was 2000, 2001 was much more intense, but they still managed to do it. Again, we have to understand the way administration operates. And then otherwise, so again, I've shown here the timeline about how different political actors, administrative actors intervene at different stages. But here I'd like to take you a little more deeply into this. So you have the union government. There's a peace outreach to armed and non-armed pro-independence groups. Now, because of this, there's an internecine conflict between them. And then one armed faction, or in fact two, they attack the non-armed pro-independence groups for neglecting the threat to the Muslim majority of the state. Right? Now, at the same time, there was a conflict within the ruling party, where National Conference member Saifuddin Soz, who voted against the Bajpayee government's no confidence, and then the Bajpayee government lost the vote. Saifuddin Soz was thrown out of the party, and he was finding some means to become politically relevant. He found the census to be one such issue. And now from these two unrelated, streams, there's a boycott call. Once the boycott call happens, then census employees begin to be employed. The employees union says, we do not want to become the sacrificial lamb, kurbani ka bakra. And they start, they say, we will not participate in this. Now the state government is the main actor here, but we have not said anything about it so far. Now, the state government was kept out of the peace outreach. So Farooq Abdullah suddenly found that he's going to face an election in 2002, and he's kept out of a crucial peace overture. So he is not politically relevant anymore. At the same time, the central government implemented the Fifth Pay Commission. So Fifth Pay Commission meant that the state government's finances were completely stressed. It could not, before a key election, it did not have funds to invest in developmental projects. Now, when it doesn't have political relevance, it doesn't have funds to spend on development. So the only thing that Farooq Abdullah was left with was to get in, stoke sectarian and regional politics. Now, because he was, sort of sidelined politically by the Bajpayee government in the peace overtures, and because he did not have the capacity to implement the Fifth Pay Commission, he lost the leeway in terms of convincing the employees union to work and to different political actors that we should conduct this census. So therefore a wide range of things come and convert and lead to a census boycott. Ex post, if you look, they'll say most of, well, there was a concern of plebiscite and the demography, but that is after the fact. A lot more finer processes, political, administrative, etc., have intervened to make the boycott possible. See, the concern about demography was there from 51 onwards. So why was the 61-71 census boycotted? There's certain ecosystem in which a boycott precipitates. Right? You need people to implement it. You need people to accept the boycott. And this schematic shows you how different actors come together and boycott. Look at 2011. 2011, again, the same actors intervened, but this time they intervened to have the census. They said, now there are three things happening here. Firstly, after the end of Cold War, most nationalist conflicts degenerated into subnational conflicts. Who will get a share of the public pie? And after liberalization, all the peripheral states saw an economic decline compared to rest of the country. So you see Bombay and Bangalore, Gujarat going ahead, but you don't have anything to show to people. So you want to capture as much as public possible. Now there's a third thing which is completely ignored in debates, is that the Gujars and Bakarwars are becoming increasingly politically right. So in 2001, they were open to participation despite boycott calls. And so this time what happens is that, armed and non-armed pro-independence groups say that it is your duty to participate in these census to protect the demographic character of Kashmir, right? And but then why did people agree to them? But before I come, why people agreed with them, they first asked the Kashmiris and Muslim enumerators to fulfill their duty towards the community. So you look at the two things here. They're asking Kashmiri enumerators and Muslim enumerators. Then they asked Muslims to get enumerated, of course. Then they asked non-Kashmiri speaking Muslims to report themselves as Kashmiri speaking. Right? And this call came from many senior, people from the Hurriyat and from student, activists, etc. Now, but why did people accept all this? Now, there's something else happening at the same time. There was a rumor that the ration card data will be updated as per 2011 census in Kashmir. A lot of people amidst the conflict, they do depend on public distribution system. So there's this fear that that your names are going to be struck off, or this is an opportunity to increase. So some people opted for that. I mean, opted to not everyone over reported population because of to protect the demographic character of Kashmir. A lot of them did over-report, but over-reported to protect their, monthly food budget as well, right? There's something kind of entirely mundane there. Now, I'm sorry here. So, but why, how does all this, politics explain the increase in, drop in the child sex ratio? So firstly, uh, you know, the possibility of expanding reach of census, underreporting in the past, migration, deployment of armed forces, conflict, feticide, or drop in contraceptive usage, none of this can explain any change, any of the anomalies that we have seen, right? What happens is that the population, there was a over-reporting of the child population, and this over-reporting was unevenly distributed across a state and also unevenly distributed between boys and girls. So therefore, when the a substantial unreal population was declared to be a boy, it led to skewing of the actual sex ratio. Now, so one of the very important works here, and which actually made me do all this, was a 2013 article by Christoph and Rajan, where they saw some anomaly in the Kashmir data, and usually demographers would leave anomalies and skip that and move ahead, but they chose to make put down a substantial comment on that, and that is how I got into this problem. So I'm glad Christoph is here. Now, he also pointed to the work of Professor Bhatt from Srinagar, who did substantial, who wrote a couple of articles at that time in Kashmir, on this issue. So, PRC wale Bhatt? Yeah. So, Bashir Bhatt. So therefore, now what we see here is that there was a connection between the elite discourse of plebiscite and demographic marginalization, potential marginalization, and the grassroots, rumors about the possibility that people may lose their ration entitlements. And in between the two were the enumerators who linked the two discourses. So they send by over reporting the population, they simultaneously satisfied the pressures from above as well as below. Now, if you look at once the data are out, right? So once the data are out, there are three different responses to the anomalies. The first was from the Hindu nationalists. This is a conspiracy to have more children and expand the Muslim population. Now, they looked at the data, they knew that the sex ratio has also dropped. So the child population share has to be carefully examined before drawing conclusions, but they did not look at the sex ratio at all. They just focused on the child population because that confirmed their conspiracy theory. Now, at the same time, in Kashmir, when people saw the data, there was a sense that this is socially embarrassing. That we are a society known for equal treatment of the girl child. How come we have reported data which is similar to Punjab and Haryana? So there was an embarrassment, there was a kind of embarrassment at this. Then now this chief minister at that time, he to join that embarrassment bandwagon. Uh, he said that no, he was aware that there was politics around the census in 2011. In fact, in a rally in Rajouri, he explicitly said that people should not look at the census as something that's going to affect the political rights, etc. But when the data came out, and despite his health department saying that we don't agree with these findings, he said that no, this is we are embarrassed that our people are practicing female feticide, etc. Now, from that, the next step was that a number of people, both commentators, leaders, and op-ed writers, and contributions to the letters to writer, people said that we cannot call ourselves good Muslims because in Islam, practicing feticide is not allowed. The fact that we have such a low sex ratio, it means that we are practicing feticide, and therefore we cannot call ourselves good Muslims. There are so many of these articles in Greater Kashmir, the papers. So people did not, pause to check the data and see whether the data might be wrong. So I would, I like to argue that we have to understand the political economy of errors in statistics. Modern developmental nation states operate on the basis of, they distribute development funding and affirmative action based on reported headcounts and measured and estimated socioeconomic disadvantage. So the moment you see that there's both political benefit as well as a developmental economic benefit to be derived from the statistics, people do at times manipulate, but not everybody manipulates. So if you say, well, if there's political benefit and this benefits people do manipulate, then the manipulation happen everywhere in the country, but it doesn't happen everywhere in the country. So unless you locate the area between the development data and democracy triangle, you would not know where this potential benefit leads people to manipulate. So and now let us step out of this and look at the larger context, which is that in Nagaland, Kashmir, and Basque land, we began looking at demographic data around the same time, late 20s, mid 20s, late 20s. But you see a very different trajectory in Kashmir and Nagaland on the one hand, and Basque land on the other hand. Now, this is because in Basque areas, people did not come across statistics first in the field of, in terms of census. They had access to scientific statistics, to, all kinds of statistics. But in Kashmir and Nagaland, some of the earliest users of statistics come in the field of politics. So there has been part dependence since then of, increasing or persistent politicization in all parts of Kashmir. It's not only Kashmir, it is there in Ladakh as well, but in Ladakh, the politicization does not reflect, and I did not have time to speak about the linguistic data, but it doesn't reflect in the over count of population, but it reflects in the sharp swings in the speakers of languages, right? And there's a deep, long-standing politics of that as well. So I would argue, and I've been, that we have to understand statistics as insignia of modernity. Lal Krishna Advani was embarrassed that 1991 we could not do a census in Kashmir, and we should do it in 2001, right? It was, so this is what every modern state does. A sovereign state conducts a census in all parts of the country, right? So if we cannot, so he said we will do. Ashok Jaitley, chief secretary, was particular to get this done. This is despite that the Jammu-based BJP leaders, some of them were not keen to have a census in 2001 because they had doubts about what will happen in the middle of insurgency. But the BJP at national level, I mean, Lal Advani and chief secretary, etc., keen to have it done. So you see, so statistics, often are treated insignia of modernity. Every modern state has to do it. If you don't do this, so then you will become part of every other third world country. See, you've been taking pride in the fact that you are the only third world country with a continuous series of census data from 1871, right? And with complete coverage of the entire territory. So this becomes a problem and an embarrassing gap in your data series. So then I say that and because the insurgents know that you will be embarrassed by this, they cannot do their own sense. See, they can challenge your sovereign statistical order either by conducting their own census or by disrupting your census. Now, conducting your own census is extremely expensive. So the best thing is to disrupt the state-sponsored census. And this is why across every conflict zone in the world, you never get a continuous series census data because the insurgent groups make it a point to disrupt the census, right? Now, then you can see census as a collective self-portrait, right? Now, you'd like to claim to be a secular modern democracy. Not having the only Muslim majority state in that collective portrait will be a blot on your image. So you have to conduct census there. And then your census, you can see public goods. The problem, now if you see from this perspective, the prolonged insurgency and counterinsurgency impaired the general administration which generates public goods. And census being a public good also is affected by the degeneration. Then secondly, okay, fine, the system has degenerated, but then we can make we can make changes there. But the problem is that you are so deeply divided because of insurgency and counterinsurgency. There have been such deep divisions between different parts of the state. Now there's a it's very difficult to build collective action to address the public goods, right? You see, before the beginning of insurgency, a lot of people from Jammu used to go to Srinagar during summer, stay there. But after insurgency, people stopped going there. In fact, a lot of people in Jammu asked me questions about Kashmir as if Kashmir is some distant country because they've never been there. They've only seen it on news screens. They have no first-hand idea about the place, right? So this, one of the biggest, the only, perhaps the only gain that the insurgents have made is that to break down the dialogue between different people in the state. That is the only lasting gain of insurgency that they've made. Now, the final thing is that no. So what happened? So okay, fine. So we have seen all these things, and we see a high population growth. But why do people don't object to it? Why don't people ask questions about this? There's been a long-standing tradition to see population growth as a measure of well-being, though this tendency has subsided tremendously over the past 2 centuries, but it still survives in nooks and corners, especially when it comes to ethnic minority areas. And you see this whether in Pakistan, India, or China. If you say something about the treatment or mistreatment of ethnic minorities, or so the standard answer is that look, the population is growing. So if the population is growing, whether naturally or because of some manipulation, as long it is growing, you say, well, everything's fine. So I mean, it's a little more complex than that. I've discussed in the book about comparing the experience on Nagaland and Kashmir in this regard. In fact, throughout the book, wherever possible, I made it a point to compare Kashmir with every other state in the country, right? Because one of the major problems of Kashmiri scholarship is that they do not leave Kashmir's confines. Kashmir exists as a, as an isolated case with its own problems with no comparisons elsewhere. But that's not the case. Being embedded in a larger nation state, you are exposed to similar structural systems, and those structures operate in a particular way. So if they are affecting you in some sense, they would be having a similar impact on similar regions elsewhere as well. Right? So Kashmir is Muslim majority, and Nagaland is Christian majority, tribal majority, but still you see that there's similarities in the way census problems there. So now one of the things, so I'll just very quickly now go to the concluding part. I hope I have time. Okay, so I mean the data quality has not received sufficient attention from the academy, and this is true for most social scientific disciplines. There seems to be a horror hazard on part of right. So when we see the national level data, we see a smoothly varying series, but the smoothly varying series is made up of very micro level anomalies. So it's interesting that these micro level anomalies aggregate into a smooth national series, and we don't bother about that. Very, it's not right. Okay, just 1 minute. Okay, so okay. I think I made the mistake of giving PDF file instead of PPT. So I'll have to, because it's much more interactive here. So you see, most academics, they would either work when they look at data quality, they'll confine themselves to the data collection portion. They'll ignore this very complex interaction between people, civil society, media, academia. And so one of my works has been to make sure that all parts of this life cycle, see, data have a life cycle. They they pass through different sections of this society administrative system. You have to look at all. This part is statistical part. Here you have the legal part. This is the government. Then the policy making section, politics, etc. So all these are interacting. Unless we take into account all of them, we will not be able to understand the problem. We should also see. Can we move that icon a little to the right, left side? I cannot see the box over there. So if you see here, yes, this one, this fine. So if you see here, you have development deficit, data deficit, and democracy deficit. Now you see there are very many interconnections between these three. So most government discussions, they would focus on one or two links, or the academic discussion, we would look at a couple of other links. But unless we understand that, well, there's a much more complex interrelationship there. You cannot extricate data quality from this and talk about in isolation. We'll not be able to address the problems of the statistical system. So just to conclude, statistics are intertwined with the reality they are supposed to capture. You cannot look at them in isolation. So therefore, standalone legalistic technological solutions have limited efficacy. Right? So to be able to understand these interconnections and the embeddedness of data in the society, we need to have much more metadata than we have had so far in the country. So I'll conclude with this. I'm sorry, I was a little too fast, but I just thought it's fine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kumar, for this very explanatory and enlightening talk on statistics and talks and subjects that are often arid and difficult to grasp for who's not very used to it. I now give the word and the floor to Dr. Maharaj.
Thank you. Yeah, I think after Vikas's talk, yeah, but let me first thank you, Joel and Lawrence, for this invitation. And I mean, I've been talking to Vikas casually on several of these issues. But then I also have a very long story with regard to not the book, but this whole question of, politics in Jammu and Kashmir, especially the number politics. I was a PhD student way back in 2001 in IEG. And I was, as Vikas has already talked to you about communal anxieties and stuff. And I was doing my PhD on one of the regions in Jammu and Kashmir called Doda, which is south of Valley, north of Jammu, located in the hills, snowbound areas. And and I was reading something, and then I wrote one of the professors, an economics professors, an email. And this email will tell you that my problems were quite similar to Vikas. So I wrote to Professor Arup Mitra. I hope you are well. Apropos our conversation, please find attached details of Doda's demography. I was wondering if you could explain following quote with the help of a table of Doda's changing demography. According to census figures quoted in an article in Frontline magazine in October 2000 by Praveen Swami in Doda district, the Hindu population had grown by 47.23% between 1971 and 1981. But that of Muslims by 11.97%. Here's a link to Praveen Swami's article. Also attached is an article in which Swami's findings were cited. So in reply, I wrote this letter on the 16th March 2011. Arup replies on the 1st of April. I have looked through the article which you had sent me the link for. And I'm really sorry that I did not get back to you earlier. Yes, the point is that government employees move from Srinagar to Jammu during the winter months and again go back to Srinagar by the end of winter. So it depends to a great extent when the surveys were carried out in the base year and the terminal years. If the survey is carried out in a very cold place during the winter months since 1971, and then the survey is carried out again in the same place in 1981 at the end of winter, then it would naturally record a massive increase in population. So the Census Commissioner suggests that the figures should not be taken in their face value. The growth rates are usually calculated as population in terminal year upon population in the base year. You can drop in if you have any further doubts. For me, this answer was overwhelming. I was an anthropology student, trained in ethnography, still trying to grapple with numbers. I did talk to Arup once or twice again, but then this was too complex a thing to be understood by a student of anthropology. Again, after a few days, I went to Ankush, who was Vikas's co-author of the earlier book on Nagaland. And then Ankush, somehow, he also tried to explain things, but I never could understand. So when I received this book, I was able to understand how complex that problem was then, how complex that problem still remains. So, uh, so you can just understand, for general people who are doing their ethnographies, people in general, for local public, census is something which is sacrosanct. Census is something which cannot be questioned. Census is something which is taken at its face value. So in a way, I was telling Joel while I came, this book is a book of riddles. So what Vikas has done is he has solved so many of these riddles. He solved so many puzzles, and I think that's commendable. And I really, really appreciate his hard work. He took several years to write this book, and we are in touch since it's been 3-4 years now. And so we've been asking questions about my field area, and he's been asking about other contacts, asking about, people's contact numbers, and we've been sharing those notes. So I mean, he's beautifully described, the politics, the administrative constraints under which census censuses happen and they do not happen. And again, I think when I look back, when I think about my own fieldwork in Doda, some of these questions, some of the ideas which Vikas is bringing to us, they were part of the general awareness, in the sense of, I remember this is the time when 2008, 2009, again, a lot of unrest because of the Amarnath land controversy. Again, demographic anxieties were really high. There was this, and like demographic anxieties, they've been part and parcel of how politics works in Jammu and Kashmir. And while I was talking to people, I was sitting in one of the offices, and they said, government is only in the city. Government is not in the villages where you will go and do your field work. So that was an indication that, how also, when I started doing my fieldwork in the villages, people would tell me that, teachers, they do not come, they really don't come for their duties. They hire somebody from the village to do their duties. So, I mean, just a glimpse of the fact that how rotten was the system in these areas, especially in the areas where where people would not even ask for the basic accountability, because people could not even relate to the state in the manner people relate to democratically elected governments. So there was a sense of real alienation on the part of the people. And that's why I think when it comes to the issue of census, I did share some of my own questions with because I told him once that, while I was doing fieldwork, somebody did share some census data with me, some of the maps and photographs. I'm not supposed to tell it to on a public forum, but then uh, he told that that is not like something which is advisable. I mean, people who do census operations, they are not supposed to share their data with common public. But then that was the reality of the place. So what and through these two or three things which I've shared, I just want to raise some questions for Vikas, because again, um, why I'm here, why I'm discussing this book is also, I'm not really clear why I'm here, because it's a book of an economist, it's a book about census, and why this anthropologist who's worked in one village of Jammu and Kashmir is discussing this book. So uh, one thing which I really missed in this book was, um, Vikas has covered the landscape. Geography and numbers, and also taken care of the politics, and also the practices, political practices, administrative practices. What I did not find, and maybe, just because I'm an anthropologist, I would like to see um, how people the people who were trained to conduct census, for example, did you ever meet them? Did you meet various? Of course, there are census officials, higher census official who you have met, but then everyday stories of people who were conducting census in these areas, in areas of conflict. Did you manage to get their stories? What kind of problems? You did talk about, this whole idea where you talked about, they don't want to become Badika Bakra. But then apart from that, what were the stories of these people? Also, when it comes to come to the problems of see, we've not, 2000 2021 census has not been conducted. And also there are a lot of, again, demographic anxieties with regard to, scheduling of certain communities, which you often forget to mention in your presentations, Pahadis. Also, there's this whole issue looming large uh, when it comes to the delimitation of the constituencies, because now in Jammu and Kashmir, they're thinking of conducting an election very soon. And there's another larger context to the fact that, you said that what insurgency has done is that it has made people drift apart from each other. But then what an insurgency has also done is that it has made in this the mobile populations more sedentarized, right? So is it going to help? Is it going to, yeah. And also, and maybe this is the last question, and maybe I'm trying to imagine. Also, also in your book, you mention about, the private companies. I mean, in footnotes, that these private companies may have better data collection facilities or techniques, or I mean, they can use technology much better than, but obviously the census exercise is massive. But then how technology of now is going to play some kind of role in the kind of data which will be generated in future, right? So some of with some of these thoughts, I think Vikas can respond, and then, yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chakravarti. I mean, I've been disturbing him for 4 or 5 years now, and often I'll call him at around 10 o'clock after we're done with dinner, go all the way up to 12 o'clock. So let me begin with the last question. There are two aspects of technology. The Indian census is quite opaque about the way it uses technology to process the data. That is one link that I haven't been able to explore fully at all. That is one part of it. The other part here is that now the government is going for computer-assisted personal interviewing in the next census, and they believe that that is going to solve some of the problems that we've been seeing in the past. But if you look at the experience of Pakistan, which have just completed a digital census, it did not solve any problem at all. See, there are structural problems which the computer cannot solve for you. It can only help you note data in a different way, but not solve the problems here. Now, the third part, which you asked, was about private companies. I mentioned that in the context of that there was a time when the state was the only supplier of large data sets. There was just nobody else there. But now there are many private corporations which can compare with the state in a particular field, and which can produce. Now, but the problem with these companies is that we do not have sufficient metadata to be able to judge the quality of the data. For instance, EMI, brings out data on unemployment, etc. I mean, I haven't been able to understand, how to evaluate the quality of this data because they do not put out sufficient descriptive notes out in public. But this is true that increasingly private corporations are in a position to compete with the state. In fact, now even communities are collecting data on their own to challenge their representation. In fact, this has become an important thing, and in different parts of the country. Now, how will this self-enumeration and how will the self-enumeration interact with if the community says that I've done this survey and we found this and you're finding something else. In fact, in one of the chapters, I do talk about a Gujar activist who filed a RTI application to show how there are very few Gujar teachers in his area, and he says that this means that during the census process, our community does not have adequate representation in how it's being conducted. Right? So there are people who are acting in these ways. Now, coming to your point about this sedentarization of the mobile population, I have very briefly discussed it when I'm talking about the abnormal changes in the distribution of the Bakarwal population between Jammu and Kashmir. And you see very changes which cannot be explained by normal, I mean, the existing pattern migration, right? So, as I say, is there a sedentarization happening? A, then the next thing that I ask is there also a simultaneous sharpening of identity within the larger Gujar Bakarwal family? Because the Gujars are 9 times more populous as per the census data than Bakarwals, A, and they are educationally more advanced and they have a higher concentration of urban population as well. So the benefits of affirmative action after 1991 seem to have to a large extent gone to the Gujar people. So there's this. So, but I see that I mean I argue that the census data suggests that there is a sharpening of identity within this larger group happening, even though they continue to have marital relationships, etc. This is extremely still commonplace, but there still seems to be some sharpening because otherwise we cannot explain the change in the distribution of Bakarwal population in this state. Now, hmm, the change is that you see that in Jammu there is a very large population growth rate of the Bakarwal population compared to Kashmir. So if that is happening, which means are some people settling down more permanently, etc. So I give a detailed analysis of that, saying that this needs further investigation because this would need actually a more careful engagement with the trajectory of movement across a couple of years to be able to conclude if there has been a shift towards this and that. Now, how will this sedentarization will not only affect the comparability of censuses, but it will also affect the way the numbers politics operates as well, right? So that is something which I mean, whose impact of centralization will not only be through the channel of accounting of mobile population, but also in terms of a transition in the way numbers politics is transacted. The second question which you asked was about the scheduling of communities and delimitation. Uh, the most interesting thing which I will share here is that one of Pahadi activists, she says that the government has built Gujar Nagar for the Gujars in Jammu. They should also build a Pahadi Nagar. We also want to have, proper houses in urban areas, right? We also, so you see, the comparison is at this level. So there's this, and of course the Gujars, point out that Pahadis have all kinds of communities. It's not a homogeneous, tightly knit community like us. It has got upper caste, lower caste, etc., etc. In fact, there have been cases where the upper castes have been reported as tribal in these census as well. So therefore, the scheduling of communities actually this picked up steam towards the very end of the manuscript. So and I wasn't sure how lasting it's going to be, so I haven't written about that as much as I should, but maybe in future. But about delimitation, I've given a detailed analysis of that the latest delimitation commission's proposals, they can first of all not be carefully examined unless a proper map of constituencies is declared. See, unless we have the proper map, then how do I compare it with population shares, etc.? They have not yet released that. In fact, the commission's work was stalled because in some places they found that the same village was mapped to two different sub-district units. So therefore, and they have been, but I do talk about that the delimitation politics on one level, it is about population percentages, and there has been a long-standing complaint about this from 50s onwards. From 50s onward, Karan Singh, when he was the governor, or he yes, at that time, he wrote to Jawaharlal Nehru that people are not happy the way the constituencies for the Constituent Assembly, etc., have been decided. So why don't you do the delimitation under the National Delimitation Commission? So they said, no, 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 we cannot do that. It has to be done under the state. Eventually, the Parliament one got shifted to National Commission, and finally, both the Parliament and state got shifted. So it took about 2-3 decades for that plea to get accepted in the center. Um, so, but delimitation politics is not only about mapping shares of population to territory, it is also about giving appropriate names to those tables. So when the Mata Vaishno Devi constituency was created, the schedule, the Dalit, activists in Jammu asked, why can we not create a constituency named after Dr. Ambedkar? Or why can we? So therefore, when we look at the data politics, it's not only about data, but it's also about the labels we attach to that data as well. Now, the latest delimitation exercise, they have not declared the actual rules through, I mean, the actual formula and rules through which they have calculated the shares and mapped the constraints. So I have, in absence of that, so my analysis for that stops in 2011. After 2011, I had to, rely more on the petitions filed with the commission and look at that. So there is a lot that remains unexplained there, and which is passed by they've not yet released the full report of delimitation. See, after every delimitation, the entire procedure, calculations, and the submissions of people are compiled and put out in public. But that has not been done yet. Now, coming to your first question about what were the stories of people. Uh, but I did, I did not get to personally interview a lot of teachers, though I did go to schools, but I did get to interview a lot of health workers across about 18 districts of Jammu and Kashmir, and trying to understand because they are the ones who are doing a lot of these, things and maintaining birth and death registers. So I did speak to these, people across, and every one of them, on almost all of them said that we do not have this problem, or at least, I mean, there have been cases, but not as severe as you are saying. And when I showed them the data that your village, because I chose villages which had population, I mean, child population of at least 100 in 2011, and which had a very low child sex ratio. So I just showed them the data. They would invariably show me the immunization register or this, that is saying that, well, you can look at this and you see that we don't have a problem here. In fact, in some places, there are more girls than boys, right? And I look at school registers as well, school data at this state level. So I should, bring out some of this in my future work. One of the reasons why, and this could be because because I'm not trained ethnographer, there's some hesitation that am I doing this the right way or not. So unless I get it absolutely right, so then you say, well, let me not begin this, but I should have included more, and I'll definitely in future work I will definitely bring these stories out. One important thing that I think you said earlier, which I should comment, you talked about the absentee teachers. So fine. So when the census training is offered, it is offered to the teachers who are government teachers. Now, if these teachers are not the ones who are teaching, who are not present on the field, so you're teaching one set of people and one different set is doing the census. People who have not been trained at all, they are doing these census, and people who have been trained are not doing census. Right? Now, this has been a problem which has been reported in UP, in Manipur, in Nagaland. Often officers say, you ask me to train people, I train them, but then I know that these people are not going to do this census. So I do not know why exactly I'm training them. Right? But as per law, they cannot, train people who are not on official records, etc. So this is, thanks for the comments. I mean, I also noted your point about Amarnath controversy. Actually, I didn't have time to speak about that here. The problem of this census 2011 began not even in the Amarnath controversy, but around the time when the disqualifying women married out of the state, when that bill was brought in. This entire demographic controversy, which sort of died down after 2001, was revived around 2004, and then after, under one or the other pretext, it continued to be there. So 2008 was the immediate precursor. More proximate would be the disturbances in the Kashmir Valley in 2010, in which a number of youth lost their lives as well. So these, for almost every other year, there was one or the other disturbance, and that had, a cumulative impact on in 2011, whether while they could conduct these census on time. But if you look at it closely, the house listing phase had to be delayed because they could not freely move around in those months. And so therefore, yes, Amarnath controversy had a role to play there as well. So I'll stop here. And
thank you everyone for your attention. Thank you again to both of you. And just a quick announcement, we have a workshop on the 29th January. All the details are online, and it is amongst other things about Gujar, so there's some continuity. Thanks everyone.